Hello and welcome to episode 239 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us on the podcast, where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry, and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. If this is your first time joining us, please do check out our previous episodes, because we've had some amazing guests on the podcast. But this week we are also joined by something of Hollywood royalty, although I imagine he'd hate that description. But someone that has Oscar nominated, is easily one of the greatest playwrights of all time, probably. If we're talking about accolades, the amazing David Mamet.
Yeah, it was one that I mean, as you say, Marco, he is definitely a Hollywood legend. You know, stuff that he's written that I've loved. Glengarry Glen Ross, you know, incredible play, incredible
The
film.
Untouchables,
Ronin, The Edge.
He wrote Spanish Prisoner.
Prisoner. I mean, so many classic, great movies. His ear for dialogue, I think, is incredible. Some of the monologues in Glengarry Glen Ross are just eminently watchable, quotable, and so it was really, really exciting to get him to come on the podcast and to chat to him for this episode. And I will say up front that it wasn't the easiest of interviews. I think people may agree when they hear it. I actually have the distinct impression I don't think he liked me very much. I'll be intrigued.
That's a perfectly natural way to meeting you. To be perfectly honest.
I'll be intrigued what listeners might think of this one, but I don't think he liked me very much. I found him quite difficult. I'll be honest.
I think you know, as he said, the thing he likes to most do is have a nap, and I suspect we were probably just interrupting one of his naps. No, but it is still, I think it's still a good interview. He gives a lot of insight, I think, into his approach to writing. I think it is a good episode. I know you felt personally
never
attacked,
meet your heroes, Marco. That's the takeaway message I have.
No, it's an interesting chat, but we'll let you judge what mood David was in when he did this interview. But before we get into the interview, I'm going to say, as usual, we have a Patreon. So if you want to support us so that we can continue to interview guests that don't want to be interviewed, then you can go to our Patreon. There's different tiers. You can get extra bits, bonus bits with some of our guests. You get early access to episodes, you get books, you get notebooks, all sorts of things. So please do check that out if you haven't already. Yep. We're also part of Step Podcast Network, which we've just started with Nadine Matheson of the Conversation Podcast. It would be really huge for us when you're just starting something like that out if people could follow us on Blue Sky, on Instagram. It's just at steppodcast.com. On YouTube as well, give us a subscription there. And the Adventures in Publishing Land show that we both do is a new show. It's a fun show. We look at the publishing news. You can watch that on YouTube, or you can listen to it on Apple and Spotify and all these places. But again, it would be really great if you could, if you like the show, give us a review, give us a rating, because it's a new show, so it's very hard to stand out and very hard for people to find us until we make the rankings a little bit.
Even for seasoned professionals such as ourselves.
Okay. We will get enough from us. Let's get into it, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just the story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page one.
Did you always want to be a writer?
No, I never wanted to be a writer. No, it never occurred to me that I could be a writer. No, the answer to your question is no.
Yeah, because I know you did lots of other stuff as well. But I mean, I suppose when did the writing sort of take over? When did you realize that it was something you could do?
Well, I had a theater company in Chicago. I was very young, and there were a whole bunch of us there, and we had our theater company, and we didn't have any money for royalties, A, and B, there weren't a lot of plays that were suitable for actors and actresses in their 20s, and so I was the director of the company. So I started writing plays so that we could do plays. So that's what happened.
And I read that when you kind of first started your work as a writer for screen anyway, it was a script doctor, and I wondered what exactly is that role, and how does someone break into the world of script writing with that role, and what did you learn from that?
No, I didn't start as a script doctor. I started as a screenwriter because I was fairly successful in New York as a playwright, and Bob Rafelson was doing a movie called Postman Always Rings Twice, and he asked me to write the script, so I wrote the script. Okay. And as time went on, I wrote a bunch of scripts. And I don't think I was ever a script doctor, but what happened was that people would bring me scripts and say, "This is a crock of shit. Can you fix it?" And I would always say no, but I'll rewrite it. I'll start from zero and rewrite it if you like. And so I did a lot of that.
And I read as well, or I think I saw you saying in an interview that, because I think you went to study under Sandy Meisner, who taught acting, and I think one thing that you said was that watching the other actors and watching who could act and who couldn't act and stuff, helped you learn about writing, about the best way to present this stuff to actors.
Yeah, the best way to present this stuff to actors is just say the stupid fucking words. Because what I realized in watching Sandy Meisner and all those guys, and I knew all of the method guys. I didn't know Lee Strasberg, I knew his wife, and I knew Stella Adler and Uta Hagen, I knew them all. And I went to see their productions and their classes, and it was all a bunch of nonsense. But it took me having my own theater company to figure that out. Because when you don't have a lot of time to screw around, you don't have rehearsal time. You realize not only don't you have time to sit around the table for a month, but that it's unnecessary to sit around the table for a month. And how do we know this? Because I was doing summer stock. And when you do summer stock, you're given the play on Monday and you're going to go up on Friday night. So all you do is learn the lines and get on stage. And when I realized that when a play is done that way, not only is it not inferior to the long rehearsal process, it's actually superior. So that's what I learned at the neighborhood playhouse.
So what does a a table read? Because I mean, from my point of view, I've always imagined a table read being something where you can really drill into the characters and the responses and the reactions that people have and the dialogue and the back and forth. But do you lose that kind of gut reaction, that initial spontaneity that comes from just doing it quickly?
No. Oh, you're saying this when you do the table read, do you lose the spontaneity?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course you do. Because what the quote, I don't know what drilling into the character means. I have no idea. And it took me a long time to realize I don't know what that means, but I figured it out. Because all that you have is the people saying the lines. And look at most actors who are, quote, trained, which means they've been maligned and confused. They'll always put in a vacuism. For example, if you say the line, they'll say and then they'll talk, or they'll say and then they'll talk, or what they used to say in the old days, they'd say, I mean, as if that made it more immediate. But what that was doing was the actor, something happened to the actor in the actual interchange between another actor. And because they'd been drilled to say, I must have a specific reaction, when that reaction was not what they'd been drilled to expect, which is to say, when it was spontaneous, they stopped themselves. So that what you're doing in quote, drilling into the character, which is a bunch of nonsense, is training the actor to mistrust the spontaneity. And so it makes as little sense to talk about what the moment means and what it makes you think of as it does to say, I'm going on a date with this girl. Here are the things I'm going to say to her in this order, and here's how I'm going to feel and act when I say them. Right? It's the same thing. You take all the spontaneity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
But have you encountered, you've directed films as well as writing them, obviously, as well, and have you encountered actors who have come into it with that sort of approach, and you've had to tell them that that's not how it's going to work on this set, essentially?
Yeah, well, what you tell, very seldom actually, because whenever I do a movie, I don't rehearse it. What's the point? It's a scene's going to be 2 minutes long and you're going to do it in 10-second takes. If they say the words, that will be sufficient. So if somebody's working too hard, rather than correct them, I'll say, yeah, that's great. Knock it off. Just say the stupid fucking words. And so it all comes down to that. That's all acting comes down to that. Some people have better diction and some people are braver and some people are more immediate and some people have a talent for being direct. And that's sufficient. To say we're going to also inject the poison of the English class into it is nonsense. You get a lot of riffraff in the theater.
So are you quite happy then with actors saying the lines almost as they would like to perform them, as opposed to you, the director, writer, as you would like them to perform it?
Well, you're just restating the problem. The problem is not to say the lines as they would like to perform them, but to let the lines out of their mouth without nicing them.
Okay.
For example, an actor will prepare to be surprised. I come in and I say, I'm so sorry, I just ran over your dog. An ignorant actor will prepare to be surprised. But actual surprise is being out of phase. So there's no in real life. And so life on stage actually is a real life. It's just in front of an audience or in front of a camera. So that instead of preparing to be surprised, if you just say the word, what you get is some sense of life in that moment. Because what the actor who is unprepared to say the line is bringing to surprise is the same thing that people bring to surprise in life. Whatever they're saying, what's happening to them is, I'm not prepared for this moment. I don't understand. But you can't finesse it by helping it out a little bit, right?
Sure.
Any more than, for example, to recur to the dating simile, you can finesse it by helping out a little bit. If someone, you meet anybody in quote real life, if such exists, or in the bar, and we say, hi, I'm glad to meet you, but we help it out a little bit, what's their reaction? This guy's a jerk,
Yeah.
right? Same thing on stage.
Okay.
Does that lead to then, fairly quick, if you're making a film, for example, especially, are you only doing one or two shots of it then because you want that, they're just saying the lines, you want to capture it and then move on. You don't want them to get too rehearsed on it.
Yeah, I'll do it. Listen, they always say the great lesson in film going back to 100 years is print 1 and 3, right?
Okay.
Because and let 2 get it out of their system, right?
Okay.
Most of the time I'm going to do one take. I might do a second. In the old days of film, I would do a second take just to make sure we had it. So I'd say to the DP, the cameraman, do we have it? And he'd say, yeah. I said, well, okay, that's okay now because you've got everything in digi. But in the old days, I'm telling myself, well, if it's questionable, let's do another take, because doing another take doesn't take much time. It's the setups that take time. But but I've watched a lot of people, you guys have too, doing 10 takes of something. The problem with that is after the third take, no one knows what the fuck they're doing. And after the fourth take, they wish they were never born. Right?
I read an interesting interview with you, and you were saying, and obviously you're someone who I've always looked at you, and it's your dialogue which has always been, I've also thought you're wonderful, writing speech and dialogue and monologues. And yet you said in this interview that, in your view, film didn't need to have any dialogue, that the images should be enough. And I wondered, is that the biggest difference in your mind between a film and a play? Because when I think of something like Glengarry Glen Ross, for instance, I think of the dialogue, and it's all about the dialogue to me. Whereas, obviously, for a film, is that not the case, you think?
Well, the Glengarry Glen Ross by Jamie Foley, rest in peace, is a piece of genius filmmaking. It happens to be made from a play. Most plays make terrible movies because plays are all about dialogue. What else is there? And movies aren't about dialogue at all. How do we know? Because we watch films in translation. You can watch The Bicycle Thieves or General della Rovere or Diabolique or The Ascent, and you can watch the films of Ozu or Kurosawa. We don't speak those languages. We're watching them in translation. So, and we appreciate them. So that gives a lie to the whole idea that a dialogue is important in film. It's not. Here's the thing. We remember several lines from the movies, right? Great lines we remember because they're great lines. But we generally don't remember scenes of dialogue. The other thing is, if you're on the plane and you're bored and you're watching the movie at the guy in the next seat, you can't hear the sound, but you can follow the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So what good is the dialogue?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. On stage, it's almost a rule that a bare stage is going to be better than the set, because the audience can imagine. Now, there are certain people who can do a set which is better than a bare stage. Certain people, but it's rare. It's very, very rare. And the same thing is true of dialogue in movie. That generally the silent scenes are better than the dialogue scenes. But there are some very rare people who can write dialogue that's better than silence. The other thing is, if you look at the talk scenes, right? If you're watching a movie and the talk scenes where the people get together, we're at home, we're watching the movie, and the talk scene starts where they're going to explain to each other what they mean and what they did. What does everybody do? Do you know?
No.
We get up to go pee.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
That's a dead giveaway. That's a physiological response that we unconsciously know nothing's going to happen in that scene.
Yeah. And to be fair, I remember watching in the cinema Mad Max Fury Road, which is a film with very little dialogue, essentially one big car chase one way, then they turn around and have a car chase the other way. And it's one of the most gripping movies I've seen for a long time. And as you say, it's purely visual, and there's character growth a little bit that happens throughout it as they kind of, these two characters learn to trust each other over the adventure, but it's all done through looks and actions rather than a lot of speech. So that does make sense, yeah.
Indeed. I mean, actually, we talk about bicycle things. If you look at that movie, is almost completely silent, and it's one of the most amazing movies of all time. Also, there's a great movie nobody sees anymore called The Thief with Ray Milland about an American physicist who steals atomic secrets. And the whole movie is silent. There's no dialogue in the movie, but the movie is so gripping. You if you watch it for the first time, you wouldn't realize that there were no dialogue until you were leaving the theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Some films can be like that for sure. I mean, I suppose that must lead, just what you've been talking about there, must lead to a difference when whether you're writing for the screen or for the stage. It must be a very different way of, well, maybe not the process doesn't change, but what you're putting down on the page must change. It must be very dialogue heavy for the stage.
Well, it's not dialogue heavy. That's all there is. I mean, if you write, the first thing any actor does on getting a script is they cross out the stage directions. And if you look at most play scripts, especially old ones, they have a lot of stage directions. He said, blah, 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 with feeling, or fuck you and your mother, quote, he really, really means it. Or, right, I'd like to go out with you with great emotion, or he's the kind of a guy who, it's nonsense. You can't act that stuff. The problem with that, as with most screenplays, is you're writing for a bunch, especially with the screenplays, is you're writing for people who can't read a screenplay.
Right.
Because it's like you wrote a recipe, and they took a bite of the recipe and said it tastes like paper, right?
Mm.
So the screenplay is actually a recipe. It's not supposed to taste like what it's talking about. It's supposed to be a set of directions to people who make it so that the audience can appreciate it.
Okay. And I wanted to ask about I mean, you've kind of talked about your process when you're writing between play and film, but what about when you're adapting something? Because you've written scripts that are based on other mediums. Hannibal, for instance, was a film script that you wrote based on Thomas Harris's book, and you rewrote your own script for Glengarry Glen Ross into a film, and wonder what's the challenge there when you're adapting a story from one medium into another?
Well, I mean, you answered the question. What you're doing is adapting a story from one medium to another. For example, I can tell you the story of Little Red Riding Hood here, right? But if I'm doing a picture book, it's going to be a little bit different because I got pictures, don't I? Right? Or if I'm doing a song, it's going to be a little bit different because I got so what the question is always, what am I left with at the end of the day? What can I not throw away? Yeah. Right? So what you cannot throw away is the question. When you're adapting something from one medium to another, you have to say, what do I actually have to have, rather than what are the wonderful parts. A lot of people say when they see a movie from a book, they say it's not like the book. Well, of course it's not like the book. It's a fucking movie, because the book can be discursive. It can say the look in his eyes was such that anyone seeing him would understand that they'd better not cross his path unless they were coming to pay homage. Okay? How are you going to film that? You can't.
And obviously, speaking of books, you're here to tell us about as well that you've just written some Recollections of St Ives. Do you want to tell us a bit about what that book's about?
Yeah, thanks. I've been very much interested in education all my life because I didn't have any. So I was always wondering what people were talking about in school, because they were talking about doing your homework and putting in the assignment. And I never did any of that because it bored the fuck out of me. So I went through my life in my student days feeling like a fool and an idiot because the teachers told me I was a fool and an idiot. Looking back, I realized that there was so little required of the students in my day that it would have taken like 1/1,000th the energy just to do the stupid fucking assignment and be done with it. But I wasn't going to do it. I just was not going to do it because it bored me to death. So my question then was, as I grew up and I started studying other things like acting, what actually is education? So what I came up with is it's the educare, right? You're Italian, right? You're being led out of something. What are you being led out of? Out of darkness. You're being led out of darkness into light. So that education must mean out of the darkness of not being able to do something or understanding it into the light of actually being able to do it or understand it, right? And for example, using a sewing machine, okay? Or for example, learning to speak French. We have this tradition in the United States of taking a language, right? You take a language. I took French, I took Spanish. You start in high school a little bit, you go to college, and at the end of 8 years, you can't order a cup of coffee, right? So the question, for example, here is how does one learn a language? And they say, what's the third person possessive of blah, blah, right? Which is the way languages are taught over there. Well, no one learns the language that way. The way you learn a language is you go and live with a family for 6 months, and there's no language in the world that you can't speak. So the same thing is true to me of all education. What does one actually have to do to be able to obtain a result? The result has to be specific. To learn to fly a plane, you can solo a plane or you can't, right? To learn to box, you can last for 3 rounds or you can't. To learn to speak French, you can speak it or you can't. It can't be non-specific. It can't be subjective. For example, to open one's mind, right? Or to learn new ideas, or to become comfortable with all this bullshit that contemporary education, which is not education at all. It's a waste of time, or it's indoctrination. So I've always been interested in education. And so I imagined this perfect school called St Ives. And I wrote this false memoir about 100 years of the school. What would I want? What would I want in a perfect school? What would I want in a perfect teacher? And I've met a few great teachers in my life, maybe 3 that changed my life. But everybody else I ever met, either as a student or as a parent, was an unfortunate time waster. I mean, God protect them. That in the old days, the first job that people got in America when they moved west, and they wanted to get off the farm, was they would be teaching school. Mm-hmm. And they'd be 17, 18, graduate of high school, and they'd be teaching the 3 R's. Nothing wrong with that. But today, in addition to teaching a lot of nonsense, the schools in the West aren't even teaching the 3 R's, because if you have them, you can learn anything. If you can read, there's nothing that you can't learn, especially in the age of the computer, which is why the colleges have died, because there's no reason for them. There's nothing that I could learn in a college, nothing that I could learn in a college, even if they were teaching something that I can't learn from the computer. Just as previously, there's nothing that I could learn in a college that I couldn't learn from a book. So I imagine this perfect, wonderful school, and called St Ives, and it's various, and it's told through stories and reminiscences of various people who've taught there over the years. And I like it a lot.
How did you, because certainly what we hear from others that sort of do both things, write for the screen or the stage and the books, writing a book is a more solitary thing. You're in total control of writing a book. I know you, when you write a screenplay, can be in control to the sense of you can go and direct the film as well, but you've still got a lot of other voices, I imagine, trying to tell you things or limiting your budget and all of that sort of thing. So I mean, do you like, being able to just tell the story as you want it without any limits in the form of prose, as opposed to the limits that stage or screen might give you?
Yeah, I love it. I love writing books. I've written a bunch of them, written a bunch of fiction and nonfiction and children's books and cartoon books. I love it. I mean, it's, working, as Noel Coward said, work is more fun than fun. So that's what I think. You guys probably have a similar experience.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is very nice, right? Because we've written a few screenplays ourselves as a writing pair, and that's a lot of fun. But it's very different when you have that complete control. Because when we write a screenplay, you've always got in the back of your mind: is this something which could ever be filmed? Is it budget wise, etc. If you want it to be successful, I think you always have to make sure you've got one eye on the reality of something being made, and is it possible to film, etc. So it is good having that complete control.
I disagree, because having made a lot of movies and having seen thousands of them, they're really the idea of a budgetary restraint limiting your fantasy is wrong, because you can make the $100 million movie for 50 grand. You can make the 50 grand movie for $100 million. The question is, what am I taking a picture of? And at the end of the day, it's showing up on a screen this size. So the idea to say all hell breaks loose, the building bursts into flame, and blah 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 blah. You could do that with on CGI, which would be fairly expensive. You could actually burn down a building, which would be extraordinarily expensive. Or you could cut to a shot of the little old lady who's going eek because her dress is on fire, and it cost you nothing. So there's
that's fair.
Well, it's also true. Thank you for saying it's fair. It's actually true. Because here's what happens when you're making a movie. You have this great, wonderful sequence that that's going to be very, very expensive, and it's going to cause everyone to eat their young and throw babies off the balcony, and vow to sin no more. That's how great it's going to be. But on the day, the burrow, right, that you're going to blow up is not there. So the question is, what are you going to do? What must I do? What does the scene finally come down to? As I said to you, right? If you can't blow up the building, and you can't, you don't have money for CGI, but you must establish that the building burned down. You show the lady with her dress on fire, right? And then you're done.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I suppose you're right. I suppose the way is how what's being filmed, what matters to shooting, where's the money being spent on, and I guess that's something which you don't have to think about at all when you write a book. And it makes me ask the question: how do you know when a story idea you have is one for a book or is one for a script or a play or a film? How do you decide this is the way I will tell this next story?
Well, let me ask you, how would you decide?
I don't know. That's a good question. I actually don't know what the answer is myself. I suppose it depends. It probably does, for me, does come back to, if it's something which I want people to see, I will probably write it as a book, whereas I would feel it's much harder to get a film made or a screenplay made and people would to see that story, whereas I would imagine it's easier for me to write it down as a book and get it out there.
Well, it seems to me that you're two steps ahead of yourself. So, because as soon as you say, "Oh my God, am I going to be able to sell this? Oh my God, am I going to be able to sell this?" You're a merchant, right? No, there's nothing wrong with being a merchant. At some point, one is going to have to be a merchant, right? You're going to have to bring your pigs to market, but you don't want to start off with that, because or else you'll end up like a fucking whore, right?
And but you do, I think I read or heard you saying in another interview that you're always writing scenes, and the impression I got was that if a scene jumps in your head, you'll go and explore that scene, and some of them will go on to become full-blown stories. Some of them, maybe they'll be in a drawer and you can pull them out and use them again. I mean, is that the case? Do you just have an idea for something, want to get it down on paper and then go back to it, or maybe expand it as in the writing?
Basically, what I want to do with my life is take a nap. So that's what I devote most of my energies to. So sometimes I get an idea and I say, let's make a good movie, and I try it. It doesn't want to be a movie. And sometimes I say, no, I'm going to, maybe the gem of that movie would make a book or something else. There's really not a lot of magic to it. I mean, we all have ideas all the time because we're all fantasists. Like that's what human beings do. We have these terrible, terrible fantasies that are wonderful, and we're the hero, or we're the victim, or we're the martyr, or we're misunderstood, or we find perfect love, or we're dying of some dreadful disease. That's what people do all day, right? It's that our minds are racing. The difference is that, my mind is racing, I write it down. That's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading about the process, about how you actually, sit down and actually work the plot out, etc. And I read that you use a corkboard with sheets of paper or index cards. And I wondered, is there something about the kind of physicality of paper that you quite enjoy, where you can visualize it easier, move scenes around? Does that help at all with the creative process as opposed to just using a computer?
Well, I don't use a corkboard. No, I have this ancient technology. I'll show you what it looks like. See, it has this end that writes things down, and wait, hold on. That's not all you get. It has this end that if you want to change it, you rub this over what you wrote down. There you have it.
And well, I was going to ask, because obviously, yeah, you've just held up a pencil, and that's how you write. I mean, do you write in longhand then first and then put it onto a computer? Is that your process?
No, I actually don't have a computer. I have a great assistant. Okay. So what I do is I write in longhand generally, or I may write on a typewriter. I got a wonderful typewriter over there. I'd show you people what a typewriter looks like, but I want to terrify them. And then at some point, I'll give it to my assistant, and she'll put it on a computer. But okay. I hate the fucking things. The most important thing I find as a writer you can have is two things: solitude and boredom. Mm-hmm. Because if you have solitude and you're bored, and you can't really be bored without solitude, right? Eventually you might get bored enough to write something down and say, no, this, because if you're bored, you say, this is a terrible idea, or no, I'll never write anything again, blah, 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 blah. But if you have a computer and that thought occurs to you, as it will, what do?
Go and look on the internet or something.
Yeah. You buy running shoes, yeah, right? Yeah. Or you'll look at dog porn. So there you're done. You do that, you're done for the day. So unfortunately, as Hemingway said, writing is easy. All you got to do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed. So unfortunately, that's what one has to do if one wants to learn how to write better. It's not going to will it make you a writer? I don't know, but if you are a writer, it will make you a better writer. To sit by yourself without that stupid fucking machine with a piece of paper and a pencil and find out what's actually in your mind when you get done with discarding it. No, this won't make sense. No, this won't sell. No, I won't be able to film that. No. Actually sit with a piece of paper all day long and drive yourself crazy, which is very close to a Zen practice, actually, with a great outcome, which is that you might actually write something.
I mean, is there staying on your favorite topic of computers for a moment, but is there a danger, obviously certainly in Hollywood, but I think writers generally, there's a lot of talk about AI and all of this sort of stuff, and a lot of people seem to think that it's a great shortcut and all of this sort of stuff. Is there a danger in that sort of stuff, destroying avenues for writers in the future?
Well, it will destroy avenues for writers, but on the other hand, the scripts will get better.
Why do you say they'll get better?
because the AI has to be programmed to a form, right? And it's, if you look at television, you're talking basically about television, a bunch of drivel. There's some exceptions, but basically it's a bunch of drivel written to form, especially the dramas. So I worked in the writers' room with some writers. Is the only thing I in show business I completely failed at. They don't know how to work with writers because if you go into a room, everyone's got an idea, blah, blah, blah. They're going to come up with a consensus, which basically is they're all going to say, yes, I understand. That's the correct form. But a computer can actually do that better.
Is it something which will help with research as well, I suppose? Because I mean, I wanted to ask about your research process. Do you do a lot of research into a subject before you start writing it? I'm thinking about something like, I don't know, the Untouchables, for instance. If there's a time zone that it's set in, a certain point of history, do you do a lot of reading into that area before you start writing?
No, I don't do any research because it may become evident to you guys I'm a complete contrarian. But my good friend Shel Silverstein said, never do research. When you do research, all you're doing is reading stuff written by some guy who didn't do research. So I grew up in Chicago. I grew up, my grandparents knew Al Capone. Everybody grew up in Chicago, especially on the South Side, where I grew up in among the gangs. It's like, you guys, I hear like a little bit of Glasgow in your accent. If you grew up in Glasgow and somebody asked you to write a book about the streets of Glasgow, you wouldn't go back and read a book about it, would you?
No, you know what you know, certainly. So, you can pull all that into it. So I mean, you've got some Recollections of St Ives coming out. You had Henry Johnson earlier this year. Are you still just writing, exploring whatever you want in terms of format in the future?
Yeah, sure, I am. I did this movie Henry Johnson with Shia LaBeouf. People can actually find it. HenryJohnsonMovie.com. HenryJohnsonMovie.com. It's a pretty goddamn good movie, and that just came out. And then I did a book called The Disenlightenment, which just came out, which is on the New York Times bestseller list. The New York Times is a former newspaper. People may have heard of it. And so then I have some Recollections of St Ives, which is I think it's one of my favorite works. It's kind of sweet. My problem was I did a lot of stuff during COVID when the stuff didn't get produced. So after COVID's over, stuff starts getting produced. There's a bunch of stuff that comes out simultaneously, which is not good for any business, right? Because if you've got like an upscale clothing store and the first thing you see when you come in is this magnificent sport coat, you don't want to put up 10 of them, because then the sport coat is not, you may have 10, but you don't want to put them up because then the sport coat's not unique. So I'm in a little bit of what they call the coffin corner, which is I can't stop writing, but there's too much production. But I promise everybody I'm going to stop. So if there will, everybody out there, here's my word of honor, which is that if you see the movie Henry Johnson, HenryJohnsonMovie.com, and you buy the book Some Recollections of St Ives, and you buy the book The Disenlightenment, I won't write anything else for a little while. I promise.
Okay. There you go. That's a promise. We've got it on video. What was the last book that you read?
The last book that I read, and I'm going back lately and rereading my favorites. I do that a lot. A lot of people. One of my tests of a great book is, can I reread it? And so there are books which I've, over a very, very long life, I've read many, many times. And one of them is An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, which is the great American novel written in 1925. And I just finished that again yesterday. So now I'm looking for something to read. And somebody said, Mom, why do you write so much? And he said, so I'll have something to read when I get older.
What about the last film that you watched?
Last film that I watched, Oh, that's an interesting question. Oh yeah, we just watched again the Life of Brian last night.
Oh, excellent.
Which
Oh,
of course,
brilliant. Yeah.
of course, we'd seen many times.
Yeah.
And my brother-in-law Matthew Pigeon, who grew up in Edinburgh but spent a lot of time in Glasgow and's got a thick accent. My wife Becca Pigeon's sister says that when they were growing up, he knew the whole movie by heart and would do it at the drop of a hat.
Brilliant.
Excellent. And you said there's not many great TV shows, but what was the last TV show that you enjoyed?
Well, there may be a lot of good TV shows, but I don't watch them. But everybody loved The Sopranos, of course. And
Yeah.
when I grew up in the golden age of television, the first television era, when there were shows that were so good that anyone who grew up with them remembers them 60 years later. But most of television is drivel and always has been. It's a commercial medium. And it's no accident that the commercials are better than the content, because the content is just finally, because it's a commercial medium, is just filler between the commercials. But I'm sure there's some good television out there, maybe.
Well, thanks very much to David for coming on to the podcast. I did think it was an interesting chat, despite your reservations there.
I particularly enjoyed being told how a pencil worked.
That was just, yeah.
We've chatted about this a lot since the interview, and I think you've taken it as probably the correct one, which is I think he's just an older man. He's set in his ways, and I don't think he sets himself out necessarily to be, obstructive.
I think he was being funny in his own way.
I think that's right.
That doesn't always transmit itself sometimes to people, but I did think there was a lot of interesting stuff in there. And when he was talking about, not letting yourself be limited by budget when you're writing something like a script, because there are different ways to shoot things to still get the message across and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting, because a lot of people do often think, oh, well, you're much more hemmed in by budgetary constraints when you're writing a screenplay, and it isn't necessarily the case. And he is right. You can, you can film something, as you say, in a way which makes it cheaper. You can imply an explosion without showing the explosion, etc. Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure if I agree with his take on it, but it's an interesting take about the importance of dialogue in a film. How important is the dialogue? Which I have to say, I do quite funny coming from someone who is known for his wonderful dialogue. So it's funny that he doesn't necessarily view that as being an important part of the film. Much like Mad Max.
Obviously, as he said, dialogue is everything on stage. But I suppose I do see what he means.
I know it's
film,
much more visual medium, isn't it?
Thanks to David for coming on. He is one of the. He is a proper Hollywood legend, so we appreciate him taking the time to do that. You can pick up his book, and we'll put a link in the podcast description for that if that sounds of interest. But next week, we have another great guest on the podcast.
Yes, we do indeed. Next week, we're chatting with the fantastic Katrina Sylvie, who it's a live... it's not live. I keep saying the word live. It's not live. It's just in studio, in person. In person is the word I'm looking for. That's it. So we recorded this one in person in our Edinburgh studio, which is a nice. We haven't
on the hottest day in Edinburgh.
The hottest day. It was so warm in that studio. I thought it was going to melt. The camera actually turned off recording. One of the cameras turned off recording.
Yeah,
it was so hot. Committed suicide. But it's a really fun chat we have with her, all about kind of another kind of genre mixing author, a bit of time travel, a bit of like kind of romance, kind of mixed up.
Yeah, rom-com with time travel and stuff like that, which sounds a lot of fun. And
it does sound a lot of fun.
She also tells us that she wrote an incredible number of books before.
Yes, a very interesting journey
in a
of
very
another
short
person.
period of time.
Yeah. Someone who's had to do a lot of work behind the scenes to get to that moment.
Exactly. So it's a good chat, and it is a video episode, as you say. We filmed it in our studio, so it will be available on YouTube as a video episode as well as audio only for those that like to listen. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do take time to rate and review us, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast. helps us to climb the rankings. So we really do appreciate every rating. If you are someone that listens to this podcast every week, this is me begging, essentially. if you're someone that listens to the podcast every week, all we're asking you to do is take 2 seconds, go into your podcast app, hit the 5 stars, because it really genuinely does make a difference for us in terms of ranking, which does then make a difference for us in terms of being able to get good guests on the podcast. So if you haven't done that already, we'd really, really appreciate it.
And we'd also love to hear from you. As always, if you want to get in touch, you can do so a number of ways. You can send us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk. You can drop us a message on social media. Just search for UK Page 1, search for Stet Podcast, search for us. You can get in touch via YouTube. Go into our YouTube channel, UK Page 1, Stet Podcast. Like our videos, subscribe, leave a comment in the comment section. You know what? Genuinely, what did you guys think of the episode? Was it interesting? Did it come across to other people as it came across to us in the moment? So it's difficult sometimes. We're so close to. I don't know. Maybe I'm being overly sensitive, Mark. Maybe I'm being a bit of a snowflake, as David Mamet would probably say. I'm just
I actually didn't think it was quite as dramatic as you, but I appreciate that.
Maybe I'm over-egging a little bit, but
you've been permanently scarred by this, I can tell. But yeah, if you next week is only a one podcast episode week, but the drafting notes are Wednesday, of course, and then we will be back with that episode with Katrina. So have a good week, and we'll speak to you next episode.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here, or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.